So far, all of the Sega ports to the PC Engine have been handled by NEC. Well, that changes now, as Asmik releases their first PC Engine game, Shinobi. Of course, that might not be good news if you're someone who is looking for better versions of Sega games on the PC Engine, since Asmik as a game publisher was not exactly known for their high standards of quality. Asmik was, and I guess still is, a media company, and they got into video games in the 1980s because that's what you did when you were a media company in Japan in the 1980s. The developer Dual had already made one PC Engine game. Unfortunately, it was the disastrously awful Ganbare Golf Boys. Don't worry, they actually do get better on the PC Engine. Eventually. Shinobi was one of Sega's biggest arcade hits. A run-and shuriken game where your ninja had to rescue a bunch of abducted children. Stages typically had 2 levels that you had to leap between, and there were a variety of enemies that required different techniques to take out. It's one of those games that seems very simple and slow-paced, but it's actually extremely difficult. When it came to Sega's own ports of Shinobi, they didn't try to replicate the arcade game. Instead, they added a variety of power-ups and gave the player a health bar so they didn't die in one hit. Of course, Sega's loose approach to adaptation wasn't the only one that was used with Shinobi. This Commodore 64 port is actually fairly accurate to the arcade. Sega published this version themselves, though no one's quite sure who developed it. When it came to the PC Engine version, Dual and Asmik were closer to the arcade than Sega's Master System version, but they made a ton of changes, and not really ones for the better. If you're unfamiliar with Shinobi, the way that you play is button 2 throws a shuriken, and button 1 jumps. If you need to switch planes up, you hold up and press jump, and if you need to switch planes down, you hold down and press jump. You have the ability to crawl along if necessary by holding diagonally down, and you have a screen clearing attack that you can activate by pressing select. The visuals for what this attack is change with every stage, but really you just hit select and everything dies. Those are all the moves that you have in this game, and if you're familiar with Shinobi, you might be warming up your comment saying, "You forgot," and "No, I didn't." There's a lot of pieces missing here, like the close-ranged attacks. In the arcade version, hitting the attack button when you're near an enemy will do a kick or a sword swipe. That's missing in this version, you just throw a shuriken again. Also missing are the power-ups that you acquire when you rescue a kid. You no longer get a stronger attack, refill your ninja magic, or gain access to a bonus stage. In fact, there's no more bonus stages at all. With regards to your ninja magic, it gets refilled anytime you start a new stage or a new life. In the arcade, you only got one single use until you defeated a boss or got it replenished from a rescue. So you can use those screen-clearing attacks a lot more freely. All you're missing out, if you use one, is the 5,000 point bonus at the end of the stage. Something that is the same is that you don't die unless you get hit by an enemy attack. Well, unless you hit certain enemies that are always attacking, but those are their own thing. Connecting with one of the generic enemies will just have you bounce off. It's something that you can use to your advantage, particularly when switching layers. Though in this version of Shinobi, the enemies that are laying flat will stand up when you approach them so that you can hit them. So jumping on top of enemies isn't as useful as it used to be. Shinobi on the PC Engine has 4 stages, and you might say to yourself, doesn't Shinobi have 5 stages? But that's the arcade version. In the PC Engine version, they've eliminated stage 2. So no more fighting through the docks and a ship. It actually means there's a pretty significant difficulty jump, because the 3rd stage in the arcade is where they really crank up the challenge. The version of that stage on the PC Engine isn't quite as tough, since it's lacking several of the more difficult enemies, but it still has plenty of the color-coded ninjas that you have to learn to deal with. At the end of every region there's a boss, and these always consist of jumping up and hitting a tiny spot with your shuriken. Also, you can use your ninja magic to do a big burst of damage to them. The boss of the 2nd stage is kind of annoying, because they changed it on the PC Engine version to just be one row of statues that take several hits to destroy. The only way to get through it is to use your magic immediately to knock out as much damage on the front few, then sit at the back edge and mash the fire button. If you don't do that, then you can't get enough damage going, and you'll be pushed back into the lightning. It's a really boring way to rework that boss that used to be a giant wall of figures. You start out with 4 lives and 4 credits. When you get a game over, you continue from the same stage where you died. You don't lose any progress at all, even the rescues. When you die and have to restart a stage, anybody that you've rescued stays rescued, and the special guard enemies that were assigned to those people are gone as well. This makes it easier to power through some of the more difficult sections of the game. The PC Engine version of Shinobi doesn't have a great reputation in Japan. A lot of people had their hopes up for a more arcade-accurate version, and then had them dashed by all of the changes made to this port. Personally, I have a difficult time separating this game from the arcade version. The arcade game is a stone-cold classic, one of Sega's best games of the 1980s, and this version is a pale shadow of it. You can see the outline of the good bits, but it's just missing so much. A lot of the things that gave the arcade version flavor are gone. This might be an acceptable action game if you're not familiar with the arcade game, but if you are, you're just going to spend the whole time going, well, this doesn't feel right. It might have been better if they had taken the approach of changing the game more dramatically. As it stands, it just winds up being a disappointment.